as you know, the Tea Party, every month we have these meetings and we try to have candidates who are running for office, and we have representatives that are here, and they tell us about what's going on in Lansing and what's going on in D.C., and they talk about all of these things. Recently, we've had an issue, as you all know about, with keeping the kids safe in school. And that's pretty devastating. And one of the things that we all want to know is how can we make kids safer in school? School is an example of a gun-free area, and sometimes that's where all of these bad things are happening. So what we've tried to do here is we've asked the sheriff to come. We've asked some of our school superintendents. We have Mr. Wandrie, thank you, from Lapeer Schools. We have Mr. Cameron from Imlay City Schools, and we have Mr. Fish from North Branch. And what we're going to ask them to do, this isn't a debate, and it isn't an anger movement or anything like that. We simply want to know what their ideas are on how we can make schools safer. And we want their ideas. We want your ideas, okay? You're going to be able to ask questions here and hopefully get the answers you're looking for, so that when you leave here, we have a better idea of what the plan is going to be for making our kids safer in school, because that's probably the most important thing to all of us, okay? So with that, Sheriff, you want to go first with this? With your, all we're looking for is what your proposal or what you're thinking we can do to help make things better in that area, okay? So welcome the Sheriff up here for me, please.
Thanks, Tim. I think if you've seen and noticed in the community here with all of us, I'm not going to stand up here and make excuses or be dishonest with you. This is work in progress right now for all of us. I think as the community and as parents, my kids go to Zemmer. I got a 14-year-old and an 11-year-old. So we all take this, a lot of times even though I have this goofy little outfit on, I make my decisions based on as a dad and the things that we do. And I know that's what we look to as fathers a lot of times instead of the roles that we play. I think you've seen recently when everything started happening, this has kind of been, this conversation has happened over and over and over again. And one of the trends that I have seen over the years that frustrates me, and I don't know why Parkland or why Florida has impacted us so much differently than others. And what I mean by that is the trend normally is, and it frustrates the heck out of me, to be honest with you. In the world today, we have something crazy that happens. We all get fired up about it and to try to find ways to fix it. But then a day, a week, a month, 6 months later, something else happens, and then we're off in a complete direction and never really solved or found solutions to what happened here. Parkland seems to have got our attention more as a whole, which that's a horrible way to say that because of the tragedy that's happened. But I'm glad that we're talking about this stuff. There's a lot of communities from all over that really are kind of sticking their head in their sand with it. And what's the one thing we hear all the time? It won't happen in our community. I think we learned, as in the Lapeer, especially in the Lapeer area, with the case at Zemmer last year, I think that got a lot of our attention. I know it got mine. You know, I'd been in here a whole 8 weeks at that point coming from there, and I've investigated multiple threats on schools and things over the past. But that one rattled all of us of the truth of what that actually entailed. And I think it made us all feel a little bit vulnerable. And that's when we really started looking at some of the things from the law enforcement side. These guys do this every day. And in the one part that I can say that's really nice about it is our relationships. We all work really well together. That's how we get things solved. So originally when we first came in with the Zemmer deal, before that, we have an app. I won't go off in tangents with you, but we do have a Lapeer County app now that we're starting something called Silent Hero. It's similar to the OK to Say project. We haven't pushed it out through the schools yet because it's about 60 to 70% operational at this time. It's something that kids can go on there, an anonymous source, on their cell phones, which are attached to their nose 24/7 anyways. But it's a way for them to go in and send information to law enforcement, to central dispatch, via text that is not tracked to them. The reason I say that is I had talked about this back when I was campaigning for this, is because I saw the need and the things that were out there. One of the reasons that really showed me with the Zemmer deal was one thing that I don't, as we talk through the night here, I don't want to forget is we talk about the Zemmer 3 or whatever you want to say about the case itself and the video and how hard that was to watch. The one part that I try to focus on all these programs that we're doing is there was a hero in that. There was a hero that was a young lady that we will never say her name and you will never see her face for obviously safety reasons. And I say in all these programs that I've been doing is in this day and age of heroes, and we have heroes where our kids talk about football stars and basketball stars and movie stars and they're heroes. That's a bunch of BS. This young lady, a 13-year-old girl, might have saved the biggest tragedy that our state or county has ever seen because she spoke up. The silent hero part, when we talk about with this new Lapeer County Sheriff's app, that it will be accessible for all the schools, all 5 school districts of ours, is because after that, I've been in this community for so long. I was born and raised here, graduated from here, coached 1,000 kids here. I have a lot of ties with the community. I probably received between 100 and 200 phone calls after the deal at Zemmer where kids or parents said to me, hey, we need to tell you, there was something, we saw a red flag, or this was said, or we had concerns of this. But ultimately, they didn't want to be that parent or that kid that spoke up about it. And I understand that because of the generation and talking to a lot of these kids. There was somebody that spoke up. We're going to talk as we go. After the Parkland deal, we had 40, in that first 48 hours after Florida's tragedy, we investigated between a couple of our school districts 10 threats, 10 social media online threats in 48 hours. If you truly think of what the man hours and the time that goes into that, and for these men, for the time of their school district and flipping things upside down and trying to communicate with parents, should we close school, should we not close school, is the threat viable, it was exhausting for everybody. And the hard part is we sat there and said, why? Now, I want to be very clear on these 10 threats that were there. The majority of them didn't have anything where they were, the school was truly in danger. It was something that was commented towards an individual, but the schools itself were safe. That was our concern with it. But the truth of the matter is, and if you don't know me or haven't heard me speak, I'm very blunt, sometimes too blunt. You got kids that are going on within 48 hours of it, pointing guns at cameras, pointing a gun at the camera, or have guns to their heads. These are as young as 12 years old that are then placing it on social media and putting it out there to get reactions, to scare people with things that just aren't common sense. If you've watched or seen, whether it's through the media or through social media, since Florida happened, I have been going to every single school. We have been sitting as superintendents in groups there. I've been hitting multiple districts, trying to talk to 5th, 6th grade all the way through 12th for my first pass through, to get in front of these kids and try to get them to understand this is real. This is serious, and we have to understand and we have to talk about it. If you've watched any of that video stuff, one of the things that I think is big for it that we're finding is parents aren't interacting with their kids. And I know that sounds crazy, but we did multiple surveys and things like that. If you've heard of all the different things that have been saying out there is sit down and talk with your kids. And ultimately with social media and cell phones and all those devices that they have out there, get into those phones and see what's on them. There's so many people out there that have no idea with that. And that's a 2-hour assembly that I normally do through there, so I won't go in depth with it. But we really have to start teaching parents some of these things. We have to start understanding that we have to be on there and we have to be diligent about it. I had the media ask me here back right after they called the day of Parkland. And they said, how do you determine which one of these nowadays are jokes? I said, do me a favor and listen to what your question just was. There is no jokes. These are 20-year felonies to make threats like that. Your lives are going to be ruined. If we look at the Zemmer case that we had on there, there were so many red flags that we missed, that family missed, friends missed, or just the way our culture is today. So We talk to people. I've said in every assembly, if you do have kids or grandkids that have been in these assemblies, and I beg your kids or grandkids, do me a favor, go home tonight, sit down with mom and dad and say, can I just talk to you about what's going on? We have went to however many kids we've been in front of in the last 3 weeks, and I'm telling you, for example, Zemmer, 900 kids in that gym, 8th and 9th graders. 900 kids in the gym for an assembly with us. I know in 8th and 9th grade, if I was going to an assembly, I was probably going and I was going to mess around and I'd probably look at girls and not pay attention. These kids are dead silent. They're attentive. They're watching what we're saying. They're asking ungodly great questions that are deeper than most adults ask us. And the truth of it is, it's because they're scared. They truly are scared. And I'm fortunate with a lot of these because of coaching so long that these kids speak openly with me. And they're worried. Everybody's worried. And that is in every district, every school that we've been to, these kids they'll sit there for an hour and a half. Not one peep out of any of them. So we're embracing those things. I think ultimately with some of the things that we're looking at, we've talked about the school resource officer. Obviously we added added the one to Zemmer through the help of Mayfield Township here and through the school district. There's a lot of things in the works with it. I think perfect example was today. Unfortunately that we even have to talk about this. But another one today in Maryland, where that school resource officer was there, acted perfectly, acted appropriately, in a horrible situation, but neutralized the threat immediately, and he was the only one as of this time that's passed. That's the way the system's supposed to work. I've been a huge advocate for that. There's many different variables that we have out there, and a lot of times we can point to, I think sometimes as adults and as parents, we get focused on one thing and say, it's this, it's this, it's this. Okay, I'm not saying you're not right, but it's this, 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 and this also. This isn't just one issue that we have to fix this problem. This is a large issue. That's why I love when the Tea Party even talked about this. I'm to the point, and I know TV25 ran a thing on it just to make it even, I think, probably headline sell. But I made a comment in one of the schools where I said, listen, as adults, we need sometimes to shut up and listen to our kids. Well, obviously, the TV25 ran the big headline of Sheriff Says Shut Up, so that worked out really well. But it's ultimately my point of that is, if you listen to these kids, they're giving us some really good ideas. They're talking about things and seeing things that I think sometimes as parents or adults, a lot of times we go, oh, my kid wouldn't do that, or no, that wouldn't be happening. Yeah, it is happening. And these kids come up with ideas and thoughts that we have to look into. And I think in a lot of these programs where I go to say, to have an avenue like this to be able to discuss openly about it, is we got to stay open-minded to what we're going to do. This is a problem we all have, and we have to look at those things. I think that ultimately, I know I can say with these three gentlemen up here, this is an evolving process every day, but especially since even with the Florida stuff and the questions and all the other things, they're reviewing policy and procedure every single day. They're finding ways to harden each building to figure it out. They're working with the police to try to find ways that we can become safer. This is a work in progress, and I think ultimately, I could go through a lot of the things with you. I'm sure a lot of them will come up with questions as into things that you want, but I think ultimately, I've said this at every time, and like I said, I'm blessed and so grateful that you have this forum tonight. But I'm going to say the same thing that I know Jim and I and Matt and I have both said in open forums in there. I get bombarded with this right now because everybody's scared. Everybody's coming up and saying, what do we got to do? Or the social media stuff is so out of control, and these kids are on the phone, and family values, and all these other stuff, and we don't need to. So we have done multiple forums. I couldn't even tell you how many I've done in the last 3 weeks, and I have another one in Dryden tomorrow night. The problem is, people will come to it and say it, whatever it is, or if you turn on social media or you look at some of the comments in the papers and things like that, they're just screaming. Everybody's fighting right now, pointing fingers and saying it's this, this, and this, or this is the problem, and nobody will listen to it. But then my question is, why aren't every one of these forums packed? Everybody wants to complain about how, gosh forbid, how screwed up everything is, and they want to tell us how we're doing everything wrong, or how we could better, or this is the problem, and if you fix this, it's over with. But gosh forbid you attend something and we discuss and get better. These forums should be standing room only of people asking questions. And we do it every day. These three gentlemen, I don't know how they do it half the time with the things that they get in the backlash from things that aren't even true the majority of the time. Or that a kid tells them or somebody tells them, and then it gets out there and it puts the entire community in panic. And ultimately, we don't need any more panic than what we have right now. Everybody's scared as it is. Kind of the nuts and bolts of it, and I know there will be some more questions, as into kind of a little bit more intimate or the actual things that you want to know of that we're looking at with the schools.
Thank you, Sheriff. We're going to hear from the superintendents also, but that's a good start. Thank you very much. Mr. Wandrie, please.
Well, now you know why I put him at the end of the presentation when we present normally. He's a tough act to follow. But I too want to thank the Tea Party for the opportunity and Tim for the invitation. As Sheriff said, these interactions are far too infrequent with our community. The school district oftentimes tries to host as many parent nights or question-answer sessions or town hall forums, call them what you want, as we can. And we all know how busy people's lives are, but with the amount of chatter out there, especially via social media in the traditional news media outlets right now, you would think that we'd have a lot more attendance and engagement in this topic. So it's disappointing, but you folks are all here because you want some answers. So I'm going to spend a little more time talking as it relates to some of the specific things that we're considering and discussing right now, implementing at Lapeer schools. But prior to that, I'm going to preface my comments with this. This is a very complex issue. I really appreciate the comments made in the video at the beginning that any response to security-related concerns has to have layers. It has to have multiple points addressed in it. It is not a, if we do A and add B, then we solve the problem of C. It's multiple layers of response, and so this is not going to be a quick and easy fix. In the last 2 weeks, I, in concert with both the sheriff and Lapeer City Police Chief Dave Frisch, have hosted 4 school assemblies in Lapeer schools and spoken to over 2,500 students. We had a parent forum with approximately 200, 250 folks attend that as well. We're planning on an address I am with our 5th grade students who are, in a few short months going to be 6th graders. We've had a complete staff review of every single procedure, policy, protocol, administrative guideline relative to our safety and security procedures to see if what we're doing is the right approach. We're not security experts. We're school administrators. We bring in the experts both in the public sector through law enforcement, but also private sector security companies, and I'll speak to that in a moment. I have been interviewed by Channel 25, Channel 12. I've issued a YouTube video to our community just kind of articulating all the things that we're considering and trying to plan for, and that's had 6,000, 7,000 views, really just trying to get the message out there of what's being considered. I think as a community, and I'm just one member of the community, certainly we hold leadership positions, but it's extremely important that we are very in tune, not just with what our parents and community members, business owners say about this issue, but also what our students have to say. Every one of us in this room, if you're a parent, has said one time or another to your child or grandchild or niece or nephew, I know exactly what you're going through. I was 16 once too, or I was 14 once too, fill in the blank. And I have 3 teenagers in my home, so the only thing that I claim to be an expert in is living with 3 teenagers and them telling me how stupid I am every day. So hopefully I'll get smarter as the years progress here, but those of you who have raised kids, you understand. So I challenge that sentiment by saying, yes, everyone in this room was a teenager at some point. Certainly you went to high school and you experienced your experience in whatever fashion that was. But you weren't 16 or 17 or 14 in 2018. It's a different experience. And this has changed the world, right, in many, many positive ways. But I say this, and Sheriff uses strong words, and I also believe in being very bold and very direct. Technology has also invited significant evil into the lives of this country, into the lives of our young people. We've essentially handed them a gateway to horrible, horrible things, and we've allowed evil people access to our kids because we refuse to manage and have the proper oversight of this tool. And that's what it is. Okay? A tool like a hammer, you can set it there, and it doesn't mean a whole lot. The operator makes the difference, right? A hammer in the hands of a licensed contractor is certainly better than the hands of a 5-year-old, right? It's a tool. The tool in and of itself is not inherently evil. This is not a bad thing because of its physical properties. But how it is manipulated and what it's manipulated for can be significantly controversial, and I use strong language like the word evil. And we have shared on many occasions in the forums with parents, so we actually did one earlier in the fall, the dangers of the digital age. You know, we hosted 2 nights, 3 or 4 evenings apart to try and give multiple people the opportunity to come and find out if you're not comfortable like me. I'm not native to this kind of technology. These, you know, I remember the days of no remote controls, and you know, you didn't have everything on demand, and many of you in the room can relate to that. We're not native to this. So because we're afraid, because we don't know, we allow our kids, you know, if they're being quiet and kind of on the phone, they must be doing something good. You know, and so we talk to our parents of young people today about what they can do to monitor their child's use, how they can limit access to it, what are available apps that are specifically designed to monitor and engage parents in this challenge. As my dad told me, it was a heck of a lot easier to raise kids in the 70s than it is today. This is a very complicated thing to maneuver, especially if you're not what you would consider technically savvy. So this is creating a constant bombardment of problems for us. I'll give you a couple examples. Bullying is a significant issue, as alluded to in the video. I have 3 secondary buildings with Roland Warner, Zemmer, the high school, and the Old West High School has, as you know, been renamed the Center for Innovation. So technically 4 buildings with middle school, high school age kids in them. The administrative staffs in those buildings spend an unbelievably inordinate amount of time investigating online cyber threats and bullying that happened, that generated, not inside the school day, but in the evenings or on the weekends, and those problems are brought to their desk by mom and dad on Monday morning and said, what are you going to do about this? Okay? Now, when I first started as a high school level administrator, MySpace was the big interactive application that kids used to engage with one another. And our stance at the beginning of this whole kind of social media craze was, hey, it didn't happen here. Mom and Dad, you guys got to deal with it, and kind of this is a family issue. Please solve this on your own. We got a lot going on here. That's enough to keep us busy. We no longer take that posture because it's constant. And Scott alluded to it by saying their noses are constantly in it. Their life is embedded in those phones, for better or for worse. It really is the reality we have to confront. And we can no longer afford to be ignorant to it and put our heads in the sand and say, well, the genesis of the problem wasn't inside the 4 walls of the schoolhouse, so, you know, Mom and Dad, it's your problem. We can't do that anymore. So our folks are spending a lot of time trying to prevent further issue by investigating these incidents, these threats, and taking every single one seriously. So it's quite a lot of work to be able to do that. I want to talk about 2 separate sides of this coin. Number one, there is the physical improvements, the hardening of the target, if you will. What are things that we can actually do to the physical plant of our buildings to make them more secure? And the flip side of that is, what are the cultural and societal implications of this issue? First of all, in Lapeer, and I again, just to preface it, I only speak for Lapeer Community Schools. These guys will speak to their specific institutions. But number one, we have to have an improved level relative to our security camera systems, our secured entrances with buzzer systems and cameras, so we can identify who is coming in and going in our buildings at all time. We have 2 full-time school resource officers in Lapeer, one with Lapeer County Sheriff's Department, one with the City of Lapeer Police, and we are negotiating a 3rd. So we will be probably one of very few districts that have that much actual law enforcement support. And we have to have an established system whereby we can improve communication directly with law enforcement agencies as they respond to these incidents in our building. We're currently working with a software company to help us improve direct communication with law enforcement responders. And we are currently interviewing a variety of security companies that have a number of platforms that they are providing for us. I've been in Lapeer schools as a superintendent for 7 years. And I do consider our district a leader as it relates to having some pretty direct and bold conversations about school security. We've taken the issue of guns in schools head on. I hosted a forum very similar to this about the concealed carry issue a few years back. We've actually interviewed companies whose sole mission is to identify an armed response to armed intruders and school shooters. And those are difficult conversations to have, and they're very, very costly solutions. I can only tell you that. Let's not be naive to this. You know, it's one thing to say, you know, as a parent or community member, well, gosh darn it, security is important and just do it. And you're not wrong, okay, but money talks, and it's a lot of money, okay? And if we are committed to this as a community, we got to put our money where our mouth is, and we've got to be willing to support what the costs are going to be associated with that. Listen, I first came here, there was one school resource officer. We're about to have our third, so the district is very willing to put forward the financial support that's required to fund some of this stuff. We're going to need some support, and whether that comes you know, from Lansing or D.C. or local grassroots effort, I'm just a firm believer that I don't think every single problem in our nation has a government response attached to it. It's not necessarily, there's no, I've said this at a number of forums, there's no magician coming from Lansing or Washington, D.C. to sprinkle magic pixie dust over Lapeer County and make these problems go away. These problems have to be solved inside of the four walls of our community. So those are some of the physical things we're doing and funding and supporting through, you know, we're rubbing two nickels together and trying to figure out a way to re-divert some funds to support some of these things, and we're very happy to do it. The cultural or societal impact of this, I honestly believe, is the bigger issue here. You know, I've got 13 buildings in my school district, and I can harden the targets all I want, just to be very, very frank with you. I can have secured entrances and the best security cameras money can buy, and secured buzzer systems and entrances that rival Fort Knox. But to be very blunt with you, and we've all had to live with this reality, if somebody desires to do damage in our buildings and schools, there's not a whole lot a security camera is going to do to prevent that from happening. Let's just be honest, okay? And so we have to attack this. I was interviewed on ABC 12 last week, and the woman interviewing me said, "Is this the time where all options are on the table?" And I think if you're a scientific person that uses reason and logic to work through the solutions to complex problems, it's a little bit disingenuous to say, well, no, you know, we've only got to limit the possibilities of how we're going to address this to these 4 or 5 things. I think the time for the political back and forth is pretty much over on this issue. Let's talk about everything. Let's consider everything. And so these community dialogues are really important, because I'm not really interested in what people in Washington, D.C. have to say about this issue, or for that matter, Lansing, which is a bit more local. I'm more interested in what the people of Lapeer, what the capacity you have to hear these discussions, what advice you might offer, and what solutions you're willing to support. One of the things we talk to our kids about is it's really hard to filter through the white noise of adults in this country yelling at each other and failing to compromise on this issue, along with a variety of other issues. But they have to be the generation that can take this particular issue head on, and I really think they will. And I echo what Scott said. Some of the suggestions we've gotten from young people in this community, folks, we got some great kids here. And I don't just say that, but tremendous. And here's why they're coming up with unique and different solutions. I agree with the video. I think saying the words ban guns and that's going to solve all the problems is really overly simplistic, okay? To say that that particular issue in and of itself, a reasonable person cannot simply believe that that solution alone, if it isn't even a solution, would somehow wipe away all the cultural and societal issues that are for some reason leading all these terrible things to happen. The kids are coming up with solutions because they're experiencing this as students. We are trying to rectify what's happening as adults, and we're comparing it to what our personal experience was like in high school and saying and kind of concluding, well, how could this happen? Right? Their experience is vastly different from ours as young people, and I think as they progress into adulthood, they'll be the ones that kind of break through the political talking points on this issue and really get towards solutions. And I have spoken to students on all sides of this issue, right, left, in the middle, you name it, And we've sat down and actually had a dialogue, and they've had a dialogue with each other about what they would like to see different about this issue. And the ability to compromise and hear each other is incredible. Now, they're also teenagers, okay? They, to a large degree, lack the depth of understanding of a lot of these issues, right? And so I'm not a person that subscribes to something as simple as saying, well, you know, what does a 17-year-old say? And gosh, we're going to change policy because of it, okay? Not necessarily a wise course of action, but certainly we have the opportunity, and I think the obligation, to listen to what young people have to say on this issue because they're experiencing it where we never did. So bullying is a constant problem. The video speaks to that, I think, very articulately. Scott mentioned the parental monitoring of social media. It is your absolute obligation as a parent or loved one of a 13-year-old, 14, 15-year-old to take the time to learn this stuff and get in your kid's phone. See who their friends are, see what applications they're looking at, see what they're downloading, see what websites they're viewing. We can point to Parkland and look at the complete breakdown of every agency in that community to address that issue. But in reality, I would much prefer to talk about what happened or didn't happen in that child's home that led to this. Now, I'm a school superintendent. I can't legislate, nor can the sheriff legislate what happens in homes. But certainly we're seeing a manifestation of a lack of involvement with our children and simply talking to them and having a relationship with them, and it's not good. It's not good. We're having more disconnected kids. This has limited their ability to communicate effectively with other human beings. You know, I talk to the kids and I joke with them. I said, God, you know, I've got 3 teens, and I've seen them have their friends come over, and they're texting each other, and they're in the same room. I'm like, put the phone down and talk to, you know, that human being sitting next to you on the couch. We are, folks, I've been a professional educator for 20 years, and I've seen young people's ability to communicate on a human-to-human, person-to-person basis has been impacted because of technology in not so positive ways. We have to start addressing this issue. The researchers on the addictive nature of cell phone use, and in particular social media, the science behind it is remarkably strong. When you gamble, when you drink alcohol or use drugs, a chemical release in your body of dopamine is the addictive component of why people keep going back in greater doses and need to do more of it. The exact same chemical is released in the brain when people are on Snapchat and Instagram to see how many likes they've gotten or shares they've received or what affirmation can I get from posting this or liking this or clicking on that. And in the same fashion, where you wouldn't hand a 13-year-old the keys to the liquor cabinet when they have a bad day and say, well, you know, just take care of your problems in that fashion. You wouldn't do that. You wouldn't ever think to do that. We're simply handing them the keys to an equally addictive tool and saying, take care of your problems that way or get your social outlet that way. We have to start appreciating the danger in this tool. That being said, I'm also very cautious because there are some significant benefits from an educational perspective at technology, and we can't. It's no longer a binary problem. Binary meaning 2 choices: either a world without tech or a world with tech. Guess what? It exists. To assume that it doesn't is, again, I'll use the word naive. So we have a world with tech. It exists. It's here. It's in the midst of our child rearing. It's in the midst of our educational system. It's in the midst of our political system. It's an indispensable part of the economy. So how to raise young people to be what we would call mature digital citizens is the job for all of us, right? I oftentimes, when parents challenge me, they'll say, well, you know, isn't that your job to do fill in the blank, whatever it is? And my response, almost very naturally, is to say, why are you so quick to cede that power to me? Right? I'm just the school. Right? My job is not to teach morality, right from wrong. My job is to support our families and parents in mirroring their values and what they believe, which is why I'm more inclined to put the microphone down and hear what you think about this issue so we can make sure that we are being responsive to what our community thinks our schools should look like. That's important to me. Because we are a partner in raising kids. I'm not the first partner, though. We are the support network for parenting. And far too often, I think we're arrogant to think that we have all the answers and we can simply solve this problem. Well, folks, a public school system is more like a triage center. We're not a long-term health care facility. Okay? We can initially diagnose problems, and we can take things as they come in the door, but at the end of the day, we're only expert in one thing, and that's teaching kids, right? The core subject matter. That's what we're expert in. The rest of these things, we are neophyte at. We are not experts. We have to defer to parents and private agencies and other community supports that can help bolster our initial assessment of some of these problems. We have to do things like peer-to-peer mentoring and teaching kids how to problem solve and do those things on their own without having an adult or government intervention every single time something goes wrong. And we also have to, I think, do a better job as public employees partnering with other agencies and not be so siloed. So why don't the school districts have offices for community mental health right in our buildings, or the health department, or other private practitioners who offer psychology and social work and counseling services? One of the things we keep hearing repeatedly, and it's a very true, kids dealing with depression and abuse and bullying and neglect at alarming rates. Right? I've got 2 counselors at Rowan Warner, 2 counselors at Zemmer, 800+ students. The numbers just don't simply bear out. We can't possibly process the number of kids that have mental health related issues. So why don't we do a better job of supporting support in all agencies, but also doing a lot more to educate parents on kind of the dangers of what's out there and they have to deal with today. So I've taken way too much time, and that's a lot more than I wanted to say, but as you can see, this is not just a simple answer. We have a lot to discuss, and it starts in rooms like this, that we have to encourage each other, our neighbors, and other parents about how to deal with this issue more effectively. And I think we can do that, but I'm not necessarily interested in some of the national talking points on it, because I do truly believe it's got to be grassroots, families helping families, schools supporting parents, and likewise. So thank you for the opportunity to be here. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Matt. As you're beginning to see, this ain't no simple answer here, is it? We got to think about these, and that's why these gentlemen are so important, because that's what they're doing. Okay, Mr. Fish, please.
Well, Matt touched on a lot of topics that we're dealing with every day, and I appreciate him going through that, so I'll go in a different direction. But while he was speaking, here I am, if some of you noticed, answering a text message. So we had an administrator become seriously ill, so I was watching for that information to come. And so I wanted to make sure that I responded and let him know that I'll talk with him afterwards. But that's just an example, and we have it right at our fingertips right away, and we don't wait. I mean, Scott talked about going out to dinner with parents taking their children out to dinner, and the parents are on their phone the whole time. They're not really talking about things at dinner. And I sort of missed that time when we were able to do that, because you can solve a lot of things over a meal. And I think a lot of kids grow up not really experiencing that. So one thing that we have, and I'm probably the newest, Dr. Cameron, we both came in about the same time, but we're appreciative of Matt because we have a relationship with the area superintendents. So if it's a problem in our school, it's a problem in his school. And we share that, and we share solutions, and we talk about it, and we meet monthly. And Mr. Zott, who is the superintendent at the ISD, he's just a wealth of information. I probably call him twice a week. Hey, Steve, what about this or what about that? And I call Mr. Cameron, hey, what are you doing here? So there's a lot of information that's shared between area superintendents. And then we're fortunate that Under Sheriff Howe lives in our community. And I probably call him daily, which Scott does appreciate, but daily. So as Matt said, if we hear something, we investigate it. I mean, you can't ignore it. It doesn't matter what it is. We investigate it. I told Scott 2 weeks ago, and I never thought I'd be doing this, but I'm investigating threats from a 4-year-old and a 5-year-old. I mean, and at the end of the day, the 5-year-old came up and said to our administrator, well, I think I just dreamed about that. So, but our kids are scared. They're scared. So they're talking about it at home. They're hearing parents talk about it. You know, the news is on, and who knows what they're seeing there. So there's a lot of things going on that that our kids are growing up with that we didn't. I mean, I'd go to my grandparents' home every Sunday afternoon for dinner. I don't know if that still happens as much anymore. I have 5 children. I'm lucky. 5 children that graduated from North Branch schools, all received a great education. And all 5 of them, well, shouldn't say that, 4 of them are now in another state working. And so we just had our first grandchild. I mean, that's something that we miss. And, you know, we're determined to find a way. It's not, and people say, well, you can Skype. It's not the same. It is not the same thing. So I would encourage everyone in this room to spend time with your family, as much time as you can, and make that a priority. So one of the things that we're doing in North Branch is we're focusing on education and prevention. So having Scott McKenna out, Sheriff McKenna out, that's prevention. That relationship, he probably has a relationship with thousands of kids. I mean, after our talk, we had 10, 15 kids come up and talk to him and share, and they just met him and share information with him and just talk to him like they've known him for years. So that's prevention. For the past year and a half, we spent months, a year and a half, training for an active shooter drill that we hosted last October. And I will tell you, when it was suggested that we do this, I was one of the first ones that said, I don't know, I'm not sure I want to do that. What kind of backlash are we going to get? Are people going to think that our schools aren't safe? I mean, that was my initial thought. And then Under Sheriff Howe said, hey, I have 2 kids that go to this school. I want to know that you're prepared. That's what I want to know. And so that sold me right there. We hosted the training, and we learned just so many things that we can improve in our district. So we started a safety committee. And we put students on that safety committee. So when we talk about listening to students, that's one way we can listen to them. Because they know. They know what goes on. They know the door that's open here. They know, how to get out of that class, or they're living it. So I asked students if they would be a part of it, and sure enough, we have a number of students that are now part of that safety committee. And when we had Sheriff McKenna there, I didn't even allow them to eat lunch. I said, hey, come with me. We're going to this meeting, and we're going to. I did buy them Subway, so I did buy them Subway. But we've initiated that. Another thing that we're doing, and it's all about prevention. We need one-on-one relationships. One-on-one. So we've opened up our schools to our community, and we've started mentor programs. And so we look, and we go through every student's grades, their absences, their discipline issues, and if somebody is looking like, and you've heard that earlier, how come we haven't noticed these things? How come those type of things weren't noticed? Well, we're watching. And then we pair that student up with an adult. And we want them to form a relationship so they know that somebody cares about them and loves them. And that is all the way through our district now. K-12. We're doing that. but it takes volunteers. It takes people like you who are here tonight that care about this issue and want to be part of the solution. And so we're doing that. And I will tell you, there's times my head is spinning. I don't know what I'm doing, whether I'm going right or left, but I take an hour a week to work with a student, and I sit down with him, and I said, give me the toughest one. Give me the toughest one. And, I love that kid now. So we have a relationship. Just last week, called his aunt, picked him up, and took him we hosted the Special Olympic Games. And he loved it. I mean, somebody is caring about him, and that is the key. So we're doing some things like that, again, to make sure that every single kid feels valued. Because we can have a lot of programs out there, and like Matt said, the people that aren't in the schools, maybe they're in Lansing or in Washington, they'll come up with all these ideas and spend some money doing that. You know what? Just help us work with our students and the people in the schools. Listen to them. They have some pretty good ideas. And, I invite them to come out to our school. Come out and see what we're doing. Instead of mandating something over here that we're going to spend a lot of time, energy, effort, and money that might not even make a difference. So those are some of the things. I do want to mention that I did have a conversation with State Representative Gary Howell as we were talking about this issue. And I said, you know what, I think there's a lot of people in our community that would pay $10 to help us fund a resource officer in our school. How many people in here would pay $10 to do something like that? I said, fine. And I asked him, I said, can you find a way to make it happen? Because right now, if we pay for that resource officer, that's money that's coming out of the classroom. And what do you send your children to school for? To get a great education. Our principals, he mentioned what they're doing, our principals are instructional leaders. That's what we want them to do. They're not spending as much time doing that as they should. And I think everybody is, I think we have great school districts here in Lapeer County. Outstanding. And, education has taken a beating nationally, in the state, and I guess a little bit locally. But now that I'm in this role, I see what goes on in the classrooms. I'm in the classrooms. And I can tell you we take on every single issue that comes our way. So they don't come to us and say, hey, I'm ready to learn, let's go. And we have great kids, don't get me wrong. But our teachers take on every single issue, and they do it willingly. And they do it for a starting pay of $35,000. And I know basketball players that make that in 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Or one at bat for Miguel Cabrera. One at bat. And they're spending a year with your kids doing this. So I think some things need to change. I hope to be part of that solution. And once again, I do thank you for inviting me here tonight.
Okay, that's good information. When we're all through here, I said earlier, I'd like information from you people. I want the audience to talk, okay? Ask questions. These are the people that can help us get the right answers done. Mr. Cameron, please.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to be here this evening, and such esteemed company too. I want to echo something that Mr. Fish and Mr. Wandrie both talked about, and that's this. As a community, you should feel very, very proud of your schools and proud of the network and the things that happen behind the scenes at the schools. Mr. Fish alluded to the fact that he doesn't hesitate to reach out, to work together, to share resources. I did that very thing today. Mr. Wandrie was very gracious to give up probably a few hours of his time to work with me on some things that are going on in Imlay City. Same thing with Mr. Fish, and I can say, even though the other superintendents were not able to make it this evening, that there's a very strong connection, and we look for ways to beg, borrow, and steal from each other to make sure that we are offering the very best programming, and that includes our initiatives for student safety. So that being said, one of the beauties of being last is you get to hear everybody else, but it also means that everybody steals your comments. So I thought I did a great job writing Matt's comments this evening. Maybe not so good with Jim's. So I'm not gonna be too redundant, but I want to start with a point that was featured in the clip tonight, and that I heard both of the superintendents and our sheriff speak of, and that is that probably the most singular, meaningful thing that we can do to combat this issue of school violence is to work with individual students. We know one thing, you can draw commonalities between students that are involved in school violence issues, but one thing that is very common to them is that they're disengaged, they don't feel connected. And we spend a great deal of our time in Imlay City schools providing programming and working with staff to make sure that they work with students in a way that build connections and have them feel connected. People that are disengaged and are not connected don't have empathy for others because they're not connected. And that makes it easy to engage in an act of violence if you can't empathize. People who are connected and who are highly engaged and know that they have a place, just like Mr. Fish was talking about with this mentoring program, that understand that they're valued as an individual, that people care for them, people love them, they have a support system. Those individuals don't engage in acts of school violence. Not to say that every individual might not have some other baggage. I mean, there are a lot of obstacles for kids, and you heard about some of those tonight. But that is the number one thing I think we can do, and we can't do that successfully as educators without a strong partnership with our communities and with our parents. Students face obstacles that I did not face as a student, not in the 70s necessarily, but back in the day. There are a lot of obstacles that students face today that are very unique. And I would be remiss if I didn't echo my concerns about social media and how it's used. I have concerns about how it's being used and how it's being modeled. The use of it is being modeled by adults. And I have a lot of concerns about how it's being used by children as well. So that is a big concern. Our solutions need to be student and family centered, as I spoke to, but there are other things that we need to do, and I think Mr. Wandrie spoke a little bit about hardening our buildings and really thinking about careful management of the physical locations in a school district, and conducting site improvements and site reviews. And one of the things that Imlay City is engaged in is going through a complete assessment of all of our buildings, and to make sure that we know things from as little as, are the boilers safe in a building, to what are the security items in a building that make it safe and make it a supportive learning environment. That's really important. Also reviewing procedures and processes, and I'll tell you, I spent today about 4 hours with a team of administrators in Imlay City Schools, along with Chief Pike for a time, who sat in with us to review our handling of any recent security issues. Because one of the things that we need to do is, we have a policy, Matt's correct, but every time we have to employ that, our obligation is to make sure that we debrief and that we review and that we continue to spiral in until we get that thing really dialed in. And again, that is a really time-intensive piece of work, and it's really important. And we devote a lot of time to that. I think that is relatively new. I mean, since 1999, I would hazard a guess that educators didn't spend as much time on that type of work, but it is key to what we do every day. Again, I would echo what Mr. Wandrie said. Technology is a double-edged sword. So there are some great uses for technology in terms of security. In fact, recently, Mr. Zott and Mr. Wandrie brought to us, to the county superintendent, some technology options that are really impressive that might help in school violence situations. I want to talk a little bit about the man on the far left and his colleagues, because I think that one of the most valuable resources we have in Imlay City is a full-time liaison officer. And he is Johnny on the spot whenever we need him. If we have a question or we're conducting an investigation that is safety related, we don't hesitate to call Officer DeLuca, and he responds immediately. Fortunately, rarely are those situations where they're emergencies. They're more investigatory, and he will spend time, lend his expertise, and draw upon the training that law enforcement officers give, and that is invaluable. School resource officers get a paycheck as well, as they well should. In fact, they're probably very underpaid. But that is a resource that's expensive. When we talk about what are things that communities can do, that would be something that in Imlay City we hold near and dear, and that we would ask our community to continue to understand that that is a legitimate and very needed expense in our school budget. In regards to things that we are doing in the school district, in addition to a facilities review and assessment, we have in the last 10 years, probably twice now, gone through and updated security cameras, door mechanisms, buzzer systems, gone to single points of entry. So the days of strolling up to school, getting out of your car and walking in whatever door you want just don't exist anymore. We have closed circuit TV cameras on all the points of entry and buzzer systems so that people have to buzz in and have permission to get into the building, and some physical door mechanisms that we use when we have to have a lockdown drill, those types of things. So in the event of that, we would have a quick close, a quick lock, in a safe environment. So those are some of the physical things. We do contract, and we are not alone. The other districts in the county also, including the intermediate school district, contract with Critical Incident Management, which is an entity whose expertise is school safety. And it is run by and staffed with former SWAT and Michigan State police officers who have an expertise in dealing with crisis management. And one of the things that they do, in addition to just general consulting, is they will come to our buildings, they'll review the physical spaces in our buildings, they'll also give us advice about our school procedures, things that would be effective. And all of the schools in the county actually have the point person from Critical Incident Management, whose name is Tom Minesberg, is a former SWAT officer, basically on call for the school district if we have an incident at a school district, and he will be here and help us manage. But I think his consulting is really the most valuable piece of this, is to really give careful scrutiny to our policies and our physical environment to make sure it's as safe as possible. Again, our partnerships with law enforcement. I've been in Imlay City Schools for 23 years, and Officer DeLuca, our liaison officer, I think hired in and became a liaison officer right about the same time that I started teaching in the district. We have a great relationship, and we have a great relationship with the other individuals in our local police department, and can't speak enough about the work that they do, the care that they have for our kids, and the lengths that they're willing to go to make sure that people are safe. Again, in terms of student engagement, Imlay City has done a few things. Now it's been a few years. We were a district that brought Rachel's Challenge out, and that was a program that was a school safety program. Rachel Scott was the first victim at the Columbine shooting in 1999. Her family turned that tragedy into a teachable moment for students, and they focus a lot on working with kids to give them strategies to connect with one another, to make sure that they're engaged and connected, and also to communicate the importance of what Mr. Fish, Mr. Wandrie, Sheriff McKenna were talking about, which is reporting. Don't be silent. If you see it, say it. And that's an ongoing theme. So we have some student programming like that. We're looking into, in fact, in the fall, we will bring the Watchdog programs to our elementary schools. And Watchdogs is not so much a mentoring program as it is a opportunity for male role models to come into and volunteer in school buildings and have a strong presence in the hallways, on the playgrounds, to make sure that kids have a feeling of security, but also to interact with students in a very positive way. You know, one of the obstacles that students face is we have a lot of parents that are from fatherless homes in the county, and we know the importance of strong male role models and connections. And so that program will bring individuals from the community that will be vetted. I chatted, make sure that we double check their backgrounds, but they'll be able to be in the buildings, have access to kids, and help give a presence in the buildings that gives not kids just a sense of security, but will have full-grown adults, extra hands on deck. I would echo again what you heard tonight, which was, you know, local control of what we do is really important. It's important in Imlay City for my community to be able to inform me of where we need to go as a school district. Along those lines, I think that my colleagues here would echo that the school funding system is very problematic, that some of the strings that are tied to school funding do not give us local control, and we are at times forced to apply funds in areas where they're not as needed, and we don't have funds in areas where they are. And so more control to be able to develop a budget locally, and more flexibility in how we spend that, I think, would be really effective for many schools. And then we could individualize the needs, meet the needs at our school district. In addition to that, I do a lot of work with our staff on this concept of connecting, and you know, we brought Kelly Middleton, who's an author, out to the school district, and we've had really now for 2 years an ongoing theme based on his work and his writings. He wrote a book called Who Cares, and it really is about how you connect with families and engage families in the educational process, both for their support but also for their feedback, and how you view your community really as customers. And we take a customer service approach and try to offer ideal customer service, and that brings our parents and our community closer to us, which is always a good thing. So those are a few things. I don't want to reiterate too many things that have been said here, although I certainly concur with what you've heard this evening. Again, I want to thank you for being here and having the opportunity. I'll turn the mic back over.
Thank you. Wow. You know, when the Tea Party set this thing up, okay, like most of you, I'm sitting here thinking, this is nothing but, you know, we're going to hear about how we're going to put guns in school, or we're going to lock the doors, or we're going to do this. You listen to these gentlemen up here. They're talking about stuff that is the real issue here. That's what we have to do. It isn't just a matter of giving a teacher a gun or locking the doors or putting more alarms out there. Those are important, but they're not the answer. The answer is listen to what they're saying and what we have to do to make the difference. With that now, then, I want to ask you all questions, and I'm going to have Myra go around with a microphone. If you have a question you'd like to ask any of them, these very intelligent gentlemen here that are giving us all these answers, please ask them, no matter what it is. First person? Anybody first? Okay, well, wait a minute.
I heard the discussion.
Who do you want it to? Anybody in particular?
Well, I'll start with the Lapeer, because I live in this area. The Lapeer Superintendent. Is it not? It's on. You mentioned that you have 13 buildings that you have. You have designated 2 security officers within all 13 schools. What's your student population?
5,000.
You're overwhelmed. Yep. I mean, same question to all of you. You're pretty much overwhelmed with a lot of buildings, a lot of student population, minimal teacher population, and security issues.
Yeah, correct. And I if you don't mind me jumping in, I think you've touched on something that's important to us. Mr. Wandrie mentioned it earlier. When we talk about, in my opinion, the most meaningful thing we can do is really dig deep and reach down and connect with kids and engage them. You know, much of that meaningful work gets done by school counselors, and I think that you may be concerned if you looked across the country in terms of the ratios of that very important position to the number of students. So in Imlay City, I have 2,200 students and 2 school counselors. And we contract some social work and some other things, but that is a big need, I think, the staffing. And you know, in a 2,200 school student district, we feel really, really fortunate to have a full-time liaison officer. And many school districts have none. And so there's, you know, there are some needs there.
I think something to mention too is, no, I don't think I need it.
You're probably right.
Kind of reiterating what he says there. Yeah, you're right. They are overwhelmed. But kind of we've touched on it in multiple spots tonight. How about when we're growing up, teachers were there to teach. Now we've turned them into teach our kids, become counselors for our kids, become psychiatrists for our kids. We also need you to be security for our kids. We need you to be the parents in some situations for these kids. Their job is to educate our children. So all of this time they're taking, instead of being able to focus on curriculum and improving learning in general, they are spread so thin. And I think a lot of times that's what happens is to try to get to that spot, we keep asking more, and we keep asking more from them. And ultimately, they can't do it. You know, and I think a lot of times the answer is what is the school going to fix this problem? This problem is so large and so many facets that we all can have ways that we can improve it. But a lot of times when we look at what they're doing, like you said, they have 2 counselors, and you got 2 counselors in Zemmer. I've sat with them during the incident that happened. You have 900 kids in that school. You have 2 counselors in there. They could work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for that 180 school days and never not even scratch the surface of what these kids need.
But the same thing could be said about the law enforcement. You've got to be overwhelmed.
I think, and that's not just Lapeer County. That's across the country.
I know it's across the
You're right.
It's a cultural thing across the nation.
You're right. It's
I was in the Park Service as a ski patrol. Ski patrollers don't patrol anymore. When I was in the Smokies, they were telling me, you know, we have this issue over here on this side of the mountain. Marijuana. So you see guys shipping marijuana, am I supposed to carry a gun now? See, that's the same issue I've seen across the area. You're overwhelmed with population of students. I think of my father who grew up in Vassar, and I look at his one schoolhouse, you know, with various grades and interaction between the various grades. One kid, the older helping the younger read. But now I'm looking at 30, 40 people in a school room with one teacher and maybe an assistant. And then you have chaotic issues, and then you have the information age, and they're glued to this.
Okay.
So I understand.
If any of you notice that a child is, you think they're mentally ill, do you bring in outside mental health people, or does the school do it themselves?
So yes, we mentioned earlier that there's a variety of agencies that we work with that provide free counseling for families, because a lot of folks don't have health insurance that would cover psychiatric care, counseling services. So there is, and probably very similar in the 2 school districts that are represented here, kind of a team approach, right? So a young person has an issue, a teacher or a lunch lady or a bus driver or a superintendent sees a young person struggling, we'll have a kind of like a student assistance team. So it'll be a counselor, a teacher, the parent is part of that. Say, hey, what's going on? What are we dealing with here? And then oftentimes we find, quite frankly, at least in my experience, that moms and dads, for the most part, pretty agreeable to our assistance and help. But the first question after, you know, what do I do about this is, where can I go to get help? So we have just a host of services that we kind of hand folks, that whether it's Catholic Social Services or other local church agencies, right, or community mental health, or a variety of places they can go to get free counseling. And then when it's not on a prevention side, but when I've actually dealt with it as a student that's violated the code of conduct and maybe they're be in a position to be expelled from school, we will oftentimes make that a requirement of their return. So one of the things that we don't believe in is just kid makes a mistake, kick them out for 180 days, and then just tell the family, well, hey, good luck. Come back on 180 and hope you've solved all these problems, because oftentimes the young people that have issues in school, they're dealing with a whole host of other things outside with mom or dad or issues at home. So when they come back to be reinstated, we want to know, hey, did you any further trouble with the law? Many times they're on probation. How'd that go? Do you have a job? Are you doing online schooling if we make that available to them? And then the other thing that we'll often ask them is, what kind of mental health did you access in the time that you were gone? And we gave you 7 free options, so you better tell me you did one of them. So, but then again, it's up to mom and dad to follow through with taking in those appointments and things. Very good question.
First off, I want to thank all you guys for being here. I've been involved with this group for the past 9 years, and I don't think we've ever had a meeting that's quite as important or impacting as having you guys here. That being said, I have 2 questions. First one is directed to the sheriff. Accountability is a big part. You have to have accountability, and unfortunately, it would be a great world if all parents were involved in keeping track of what their kids are doing. Unfortunately, they're not. And when you get some of these issues like are there methods to hold parents accountable for the things that their kids are doing in school? So that would be my question to the sheriff. And as far as for the superintendents, I know my last one graduated high school 4 years ago. It's going to be graduating college here in about 6 weeks. And been fairly versed on school issues, and I know your budgets are always squeaky thin, and you start adding, even though you've got some of your liaison officers and your school officers, for the most part, I don't think they're at one building all the time. They're moving between buildings. To fund that legislatively, I would ask all you guys, is there something that we can ask from our legislators, something that we could change to give you folks, either district by district or as a county or however it's worded, but to give you folks the ability to have funding for this and maybe to go to the taxpayers and give the choice. Maybe it goes through, maybe it doesn't. But I will tell you, as a father of 2, both my kids are in their 20s now. There is no amount of money that you could never put a price on our children, grandchildren, anything like that. There's just our banks are safe, our courts are safe. You go to the airport. It has befuddled me for 25 years why we don't have some better means of protecting our kids. But having said it again, so if the issue of the accountability and the issue of legislatively, because that's one thing that we're pretty good at, getting the word out, what could be done?
Great question. The accountability is the thing that we talk, I think, in half our meetings about of running it. And I'll give you an example. One of the things, you can argue both ways on this. The Zemmer deal from there, it got thrown in at the kind of the end game prior to their sentencing, that those families were charged large sums of money for the school district, for the prosecutors, and for the sheriff's department, and the man hours and woman hours. So I think the lowest amount for that out of the 3 kids, I think it was $22,000 that was charged per family. The hard part, I think, that we're seeing, and even with not only with their staff, but I'll use some of our Deputy White that's at Zimmer. We look at as an SRO and what happened today in Maryland. The primary job of that deputy or that officer is to, if we had a situation like that on a threat. What happens a lot of times is they get so overwhelmed with family issues, and when we put it in, or when Deputy White went in, we looked at it as kind of across the board. Obviously safety purposes, but it's another way to relate to these kids. You would not believe how many of these kids, when you get in there, that are labeled such as bad or troubled kids or parents can't control with them, and all of a sudden you get down and scratch that surface a little bit, and you find out what the true root of the problem is. It's stemming from home. So I think Deputy White at halftime, or a big majority of his job, is being Dr. Phil, is because they don't have those parts in there. I think we do. I think that's another part when we talk about accountability, is when we really focused on getting these kids the message of social media is dangerous, but not only that, the threats and the consequences that come with that now. But I think that's why we really push for the parent forums, and the media's been so helpful to us with the county press. They've been hammering this stuff, because I think we all see the problem is, I say it very openly, I love what we're doing in the schools and talking to the kids. The ones that I get excited about are the parent forums, because to get there and say to them, the problem is trying to get the people that are in those rooms. I don't have any problem saying it. I told you I'm very blunt. Usually the people that are in that room are the ones we don't need in that room. The ones that need to be in there are the ones not coming anyways. So I think the accountability side, I think you're starting to see changes in that in prosecutors' office across the country, because ultimately it comes to the point of we can sit and say, yes, as a kid, you did this, but then when we look back and see where their path that brought them to that point, some of them had no chance from the beginning. So I think we are really looking at that. We're trying to find resources, like you said, through CMH. The true primary role of an SRO in a school, and I know it is with Mr. Wandrie, we're not in there to arrest kids. We're in there to try to deter those things and get them the help that they need. That's, I think, where our goal is. But the accountability thing is something that I know Lapeer County is really starting to talk about this, and we're starting to address those situations head on. I can guarantee you over the last 3 weeks of having parent forums all over, here, Dryden tomorrow night, I upset some people, because ultimately I'm going to say the things that need to be heard. I'm not the best parent. I screw up every day, but I continue to try to get better. So I think by taking those head on and finally talking about these things of, you know what, parents, get into your kids' phones. The Zemmer deal. Prior to that, once we went back into it, they were on multiple social media sources posting pictures of Columbine, calling Klebold and the kids that reenacted that, calling them gods. These are 14-year-old kids that are posted on social media. How are we not told of that? And how are parents not looking on there to see, or even that network of group for people to come, hey, little Johnny just posted something about Columbine with the photos on there, calling them gods, and they're going to be the next gods in this town. We have to talk about that. And ultimately, we're going to upset some people. And truthfully, that's why I was voted in here to do it. If I upset you, I'm sorry, but I'm going to speak the truth.
And the accountability question from the school perspective is very similar. I despise the phrase zero tolerance because it completely absolves a school district of any responsibility to do a deep investigation on each of these situations, because they are unique and different, right? So you people hired us and entrusted us with the ability to problem solve and reason to these circumstances. But I can tell you this. Dealing with these threats or supposed threats or kids that may have intended it to be a joke, it's about as close to zero tolerance as someone like me will get in terms of the types of consequences that we will administer to kids and their families for engaging in this behavior, because the amount of instructional time lost and the amount of scared kids and scared parents that and the types of resources we have to employ. I can tell you there hasn't been a day, not one, since the Parkland shooting, where I haven't had to make a decision about whether or not to communicate to the entire town about an incident that we were investigating. And, Mr. Cameron and I had this conversation today. The shortened time frame that we have to make a really good decision has been absolutely destroyed by social media. So now instead of sitting down in our office with some advisors around us saying, okay, we got this issue, we have a threat, we have to investigate it, that takes time. If you involve the police department or sheriff's office, that adds another layer of time, because they've got things that they're working on too. The community's desire to have almost immediate communication on these issues is almost insatiable. And it gets to the point where if they don't know about it before their kid gets home, They're on Facebook, they're on social media, and they're just crushing us. They're crushing the sheriff's department. They're crushing the superintendent. Why didn't we know sooner? We have found out many incidents from Facebook before we heard of them firsthand, from the investigating authority or from the teacher or the principal. It's a little hard to develop a sound and reasonable reaction or response to something that requires complexity in that short of a time frame. And so the issue that Mr. Cameron was referring to earlier that he and I spoke about today was that very issue, right? We've got a serious incident, and I think people have a desire for quick and not accurate information. Right? We just want to hear something, but oftentimes we're not in a position to give accurate information, and a bigger crime is to provide misinformation, we think. So you're looking at people that are well-meaning people, right? We don't like this issue any more than you. Trust me, we don't like it a lot more because we're parents too. So we wear that hat every day, the fear that the community feels. But we're also charged with trying to manage the safety of several thousand young people and several thousand adults that come and work and visit our buildings every single day. The accountability piece is huge, Bill. It's huge that a message be sent in some way that this will not be tolerated in our community. And I don't know the answer to that. I can only know the limitations of our authority predetermine what we can and cannot do. Legislatively, I've spoken directly with Congressman Mitchell and Representative Howell, and my board president, Mike Keller, has spoken directly with Senator Green about a legislative solution. Not necessarily, don't tell us what to do. I think the people in this room, I think the people that you've chosen as your local leaders have a much better idea of how to spend the money. But the fact that we don't have earmarked dollars for school security at this point in the game, maybe that's on us that we have not pressed that issue. Because what happens when I spend money on a school resource officer, it's coming out of the math curriculum. Right? It's coming out of new textbooks or new technology that has a benefit for kids, right? Or hiring another staff member that can work to help a struggling student because they didn't do well on algebra. That's where I want our dollars to go, right? We are experts in educating. We are not experts, nor do we have separate funding for security-based measures. You know, we would all think it's crazy to tell the sheriff's deputies, okay, in addition to enforcing the law of the land, which is their primary constitutional obligation, right? You have to, en route from arrest to jail cell, perform a counseling service on that particular individual. Everybody in the room would say, well, that's not the policeman's job. Their job is to identify whether a crime has been committed, collect evidence for prosecution, and stop the threat. That's what police officers do. Yet we have literally no fear or pause when we tell an educator whose primary function is to teach, you should have a gun and be a security guard for that student, that building, that room. It doesn't make any sense. That being said, right, do we need to consider what that might look like if we've exhausted all their options and they're not working? The answer is absolutely yes, 100% unequivocally. Right? But we really want to be careful as a community and society in really blurring the lines of who has an expertise in which area. But I certainly agree with you, and I would urge the community that when you have, I think our local leaders are very accessible people. Every time I talk to one of the three gentlemen that I just mentioned locally that have been elected here, they are returning my phone calls, they have come to meetings, they want to engage in this topic in particular, they think it's important. So I think we stand in a really good position to get some response from Lansing. And I'm not talking about it in terms of new legislation that limits our power and authority, but does earmark significant dollars for this. Because to the gentleman's point earlier, with 2, potentially 3 school resource officers and 5,000 students, the numbers still don't add up. Still not enough.
First of all, I would like to thank all of you for being here tonight. I've been to 3 parent forums and 1 student assembly in Lapeer schools, and Superintendent Wandrie is correct. You could hear a pin drop at Zemmer that morning. So, Dr. Cameron, thank you. I'm an Imlay City alumni. Superintendent Fish, I love your idea of this one-on-one peer thing. I'd like to see that happen, Mr. Wandrie. The very first what I'd like Mr. Wandrie and Sheriff McKenna to talk about is the first parent forum you did. Matt, you shared about apps that parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles could put on their phone to help keep an eye on their children if you have that information. And then I don't use Snapchat, but my daughter does, and she's 28 now, or 20, and she's like, it goes away, Mom. So Sheriff McKenna, you haven't mentioned it tonight, and you've mentioned it. I just think it's really important for this group to know Snapchat never goes away, and the evils that can occur with Snapchat. So I'd encourage all of you, if there's more of these, to keep going, because I've learned something at every one of them. I've never heard Mr. Superintendent Fish or Dr. Cameron. I've heard Mr. Wandrie, and Sheriff McKenna, and I've learned from all four of you tonight something new. And I don't have children in the school district. I don't have grandchildren, but I love kids, and we need to do all we can to protect them as a community, not just lay it on our certain individuals. So
I think the one thing I want to say with these gentlemen, I was retired out of Genesee County prior to taking the spot. I don't know if I've seen an overall more competent superintendent staff in a county. I come from a municipality that has 5 school districts there also. And I know Mr. Cameron mentioned it. A lot of times in communities, superintendents don't work together, kind of like law enforcement in some ways. And I think we're finally realizing that we need to all come together. And the relationship between all of these school districts and the law enforcement is, we're there. We've arrived. So now this is how we get better. To touch basically on the stuff, if your kids or grandkids have been in the programs, that's why I found it really important that a lot of these things were happening with social media, whether we talk about Snapchat or Instagram or any of those things. And again, that's a whole other 2-hour program. But the part of it is, here's the truth of it. If there's a headline to be said that's going to all these kids and talking to them there, and I said the exact same thing I said to you a little bit earlier. I stood in front of all of them and said, I am not here because I want to see you, I want to arrest you in the near future. I'm here because we care. I'm here because I want to make sure that you don't make the mistakes that some of these other kids made. Because the truth, kind of like I said about the joke part earlier, is we are now in Lapeer County, with us, and the prosecutor and I have talked very openly about this, is we are prosecuting these cases. There is no jokes. And we say that in an open forum of kids. I don't want you to make that mistake. I got 1,000+ kids that I love here and consider my kids that I've coached. I don't want to see them make those mistakes. But the bad part is, if they do, we have to prosecute it. We're in that day and age of society. And I've had parents that have sat in some of these forums to me and said, this is ridiculous, we need to hang these kids, we need to do it. And then their kids make that mistake. And then I get the part of, they're just kids, Scott. I know, but I'm being very clear to the entire county by saying, we're in a different time. We're in a time that driving here in the Maryland one going, what is going on? There is no screwing around anymore. And I want these kids to be very loud and clear on what they have happened. There's dangers out there, just like Matt said. There's so many things with it. The Snapchat stuff, any of that stuff doesn't go away. Briefly on it, we took obviously all the phones, all social media from the kids from Zimmer. On one cell phone that was active for 18 months, 35,000 files on it. I saw the very first text, very first picture he took, every social media post that he put. Every single one of them.
It's a mini supercomputer.
Yeah.
In their pocket.
And they really believe, just like Jan said, they believe that it's gone within 12 or 24 hours. And ultimately, when I say this in front of all these kids, when you're talking about it, I'll get to that part and say, because I ask them every time, hey, how long is Snapchat on? 12 hours, 24 hours, 12 hours, 24 hours. Okay, 12, 24. The answer is never. And you see all of them swallow a volleyball because they're like, oh, Lord. But the truth is, it doesn't go away. And everything is on there. And the parts that, and I'm going to just tell one social media story, because if you haven't heard me say it, this is the one that gets everybody's attention. We have an active investigation that has been turned over to the feds at this point. A young lady just turned 14 years of age in one of our school districts. She's on Snapchat, wasn't supposed to be on Snapchat. Mom and Dad weren't monitoring it, it was on her phone. She goes into the phone. She's on Snapchat talking back and forth, obviously with her friends, how they do it. She receives a request to talk with another individual who she believes is in her school district. There's no picture in the profile that's attached to it, so she doesn't see the photo of this person. There's a diagram of sorts. Well, her response is she believes it's little Johnny from her school. He's a nice kid. Yeah, I'll talk to him. For 4 days, they talk back and forth. Very casual, nice conversation. He's a nice kid. On day 5, little Johnny says, hey, I need you to do something for me. She says, oh, what's that? He says, I need you to take naked photos of yourself and send them to me. She's like, no, I'm not going to do that. Well, back up. Snapchat, in the summer of last year, in the July area, they did an update on all their phones. First of all, let's make it very clear. Snapchat, Instagram, or whatever, they could care less about our kids. This is about money. They do an update, which you've probably received on your phone for apps or things that you have on there. What happens? Pops up. Do you want to update it? I'm guilty of it at times. Okay, I just want it off my screen. Or no, cancel. Kids do the same thing, if not worse. That update in June of July of last year, they send out kids across the country. Okay, send it. It turns on your location services on your phone. They don't care about our kids. And let me tell you to show, when I'm not preaching at you, because I fell short of it. My son's in a ball tournament in Detroit. We're camping at the Port Huron KOA at that time. I got 15 kids that are playing ball. They got an early game. We put them all to bed. Parents go sit around a campfire with the campers, and the one mom says, hey, Scott, what about this Snapchat update that comes in? I said, I'm sorry, I don't even know what you're talking about. I do this for a living, and I didn't even know about it. I said, well, what are you talking about? She helps with the coaches, with all the teams, so she has all 15 of our kids on Snapchat. She goes, well, let me show you. Pulls up the phone, and she goes, my son's name is Braden. She goes, there's Braden right there. It shows him, he's actually asleep in our motorhome, but it shows Braden on site number 22 in the Port Huron KOA. Think about how scary that is. So I'm floored by it, absolutely floored by it, and I'm sick to my stomach. 5 of our kids did not, and my son truly did not know that was on. Now they have a thing called ghost mode. Let's fast forward to this. This young lady had this on, didn't even know it, that she had the update. So on day 5, he says, send me the nude photos of yourself, please. She goes, no, I'm not going to do that. And he goes, yeah, you are. So for the last 4 days, he's watched her, because her location service is on, he's watched everywhere she's went. He knows where she lives, knows what school she goes to. And then his response to her is, no, you're going to send them to me, because otherwise I'm going to go to 123 Main Street, which is her address that he gives her, and says, I'm going to kill your parents. I don't know as an adult how I'd handle that, let alone a 13 turning 14-year-old young lady. So she panics, doesn't know what to do with it. He then comes back with a comment to her school saying what he's going to do to her, after that, what he's going to do to her in the parking lot. She is in full-blown panic. The national average of kids that when they're put in situations like this, such as dangers, sexting, any of the things we're talking about, the amount of the percentage across the country that will go to their parents when they're concerned about it, 2%. And ultimately, this young lady wasn't supposed to be on Snapchat, so if I go to mom and dad, I'm in trouble anyways. So they ultimately, she goes and tells a friend of hers at school. That friend goes and tells her mom, thank gosh. That mom calls this mom and says, you got a problem. We get called to it. Deputy goes there. To shorten up the story, we do a search warrant on this house. We find out that this is a middle-aged man living in his mom's basement in a county next to us. Not little Johnny that's supposed to be in this school. We raid the house. We find out that he's got hundreds of girls that he's doing with in 3 different states. The FBI obviously is taking the case down. Here's the gut-wrenching part of it, and I look around just to make sure there's no kids in here, but the gut-wrenching part of that is, as detectives and as what we do, is then when we pull this electronic evidence to show it, there is girls after girls after girls after girls on there with naked photos that had taken photos of themselves because they believed mom and dad were going to die, and then send them to him. And the problem is, they're bawling their eyes out when they take the photo because mom and dad are going to be dead. I know I speak very loud and very passionate about this. This is why we stand in front of the kids every day. This is why we do parent forums. These are what Jan's talking about when we say people go, I get people all the time that say, Scott, I don't really know, I don't understand social media, so I can't really get in there and do it. Make yourself understand, or take the phone away until you educate yourself on what's going on in those phones. Very strong story. I'm telling you, 1 of 100 this year.
So on my phone right now, there are 26 possible what are called connect accounts, and these are the icons. So it's got Twitter and Facebook and the ones we're familiar with, and Snapchat and Instagram. But you can't even keep up with these things. Our kids are jumping on these different apps constantly. There's 26 of them. Like I said, they're called connect accounts, and just I mean, this is a billion-dollar industry, right? Getting kids and human beings to connect. I'm really glad Jan asked the question about what are some ways to combat this. There's several apps that are available that when parents enter the cell phone's code information on their phone, they can monitor. And Scott always tells a great story when we do these presentations, but, you know, parents sometimes get a little squeamish about checking their kids' phones, and they'll articulate to us oftentimes, well, it's a violation of my kids' civil rights. And you know, we kind of laugh at that because we were raised in homes, and we are fathers in homes where children don't have civil rights, right? So, and if that story doesn't motivate you to violate your children's civil rights, I really don't know what's going to help you do that, right? You've got to be proactive. Even good kids, quote-unquote good kids, who are well-meaning in their efforts to be connected with their friends, get caught up in some of these really bad things. And so it's not as though it's the bad kids out there who are purposefully seeking out this bad material or this bad interaction. Really good kids are getting caught up in this stuff too. So it isn't an indictment on your child, right? Or your children. It's just to protect them from evil. Some of the apps that are out there that I've personally used and seen a lot of good results: Teen Safe, TEENSAFE, Custodio, which is short for custodial, QUSTODIO. Bark is another good one, BARK. And what you can do is you can set up, and folks, if you're not really tech savvy, this stuff is really simple. 4 or 5 steps in setting up on your phone, entering your kid's information on it, and you'll get alerts on your phone when there is sexting, or there is a particular site that's been flagged, or a certain app you don't want to be on their phone. So like Scott's story about the young lady who wasn't even supposed to be on Snapchat, if they engage in Snapchat, bam, you get an alert. It lets you know right away. One that I use that's really effective, especially for young drivers, is called Life 360. And some of these tracking devices on phones, I mean, this stuff is, you know, 20 years ago, this was like high-level government stuff, right? GPS tracking of other people. That was like, you know, Delta Force, Navy SEAL type stuff. Well, now your 12-year-old has the same power that 20 years ago was like in a futuristic movie, okay? But I have on my phone Life 360, and what it does is it has the geolocation of every cell phone in my home. So my daughter's at home, my wife's at home, my son's at home, both my sons are at home, and I am near 1900 North Saginaw Street. I believe that's the actual address of this place, isn't it? So right here, then it actually on a map shows where they're at with a bubble in their name. So here's Matt in North Lapeer, and here are the kids in Oxford, and my wife down there. Then it also creates, I'll click on my oldest son, he'll love this. My oldest son is 17 years old. So a weekly driver report. Let's see how Thomas drove this week. 8 total drives, 32 miles, top speed 62 miles an hour. Okay, M24 in Oxford and Lake Orion is 55, so 7 over, not bad. Hard braking, 1 incident, and rapid acceleration, 14 incidents. Okay. Now, my wife and I are laying in bed one night. Thomas is at a passing scrimmage for football in Holly. So it's great because we can say to ourselves, all right, is the boy on the road yet? You know, when's he coming home? So we get on there. My wife clicks on the driver report, 82 miles an hour on I-75. So the unsuspecting 17-year-old comes home from his passing scrimmage on a warm summer's evening. He walks into our bedroom. Hey, Mom and Dad, how are you guys? You know, he's doing his best Eddie Haskell impression. And we have this stern look on our face, and you know, he automatically knows that's not good because my wife is an extremely bubbly, happy, positive person. So if she doesn't greet him with a hug and a kiss and how are you, honey, he knows something's up. And he looks at me, he goes, what? And she says, 82 miles an hour. Ma, there was a semi, and I was going to miss my exit, and we had to get off right away. And, you know, so in that instance, it was a great conversation because what did we say? Son, there's absolutely no reason to go 82 miles an hour. Slow down to 50, get behind the semi, and get off at the next exit. We don't race. You're not going to win a race with a semi. But in that instance, it's a really, really good tool. And it's tough to be a kid these days because we're on them like hawks. So, you know, the old days when you would go to spend the night at a friend's house, Mom, I'm going over to Susie's house. I'll see you tomorrow. And, you know, you can't call because the phone doesn't work at her house. And, you know, her mom's sick. So whatever you do, don't call. I'm there. Trust me. Or our kids, we actually have them document their friends' houses. So my best friend's son is Michael. He leaves our house. 15 minutes later, it better stay at Michael's house, right? Because we know what's going on. So it's great to keep our kids safe. The accountability is great, right? And this is my overarching comment on accountability. Like I said, I'm not an expert in much, but when it comes to teenagers, I think I am. A lot of us are because we've done this for many, many years. Your children, our children, desire accountability. They want structure. They want adults in their lives to act like adults, keep them accountable, but also protect them from themselves. And they'll look at you and dead as they can be and say, I hate you and you're the meanest and you're the worst person and, you know, Bobby's parents don't do this and Susie's parents don't do that. Your kids desire structure. And the new structure in their life has to be limited use of technology. And one thing that I always impart kind of as a little parenting kind of nugget is raise your kids to respect you when they're 30, not like you when they're 16. Right? And that will frame your conversations with them so much better. Right? They don't need another friend. They got enough buddies. Okay? They don't need another friend. They need at least one parent, and at the best two. So those three I found a lot of our parents use them. You just, and even if you just want to Google child monitoring apps or you know, child monitoring software, and you'll get those 4 or 5 that I just mentioned come up right away, and they're really useful.
Just real quick.
From speeding down the road, when our students, our kids are being killed in schools right now, school shootings, and I think we really need to zone in on that conversation, because I feel like we just wasted 15 minutes when children are dying right now.
Okay, next question.
Just real quick, just to touch on the Life 360 app, I use that with my kids. My kids are younger. They're 13 and 11. They do have cell phones. They don't like that I check on them, where they're at. Oh, you're at CFI. Oh, you're at Owen Warner. I don't care if you like it. I need to know you're on the bus. I need to know you're in the building. My daughter goes to dance several nights a week. A lot of the times I don't take her because I am working. I have a sitter take her or my dad take her. Check in. There's a check-in right next to her name. She has to check in. I get an alert, so I know she's there. It's not a big deal. But she has to know that phone comes with responsibilities. And just a quick question for you, Matt, just because I am a Lapeer parent. My daughter does participate in the Grow to Glow program at Roland Warner. For those of you who don't know what that is, it is a mentor program where older high school girls come to the middle school level, and they spend their lunch hour talking about body image, bullying, just that kind of stuff on a peer-to-peer level. But what we don't have is a program for that for boys. So I'm wondering who we have to, if that's an issue that the high schoolers came up with for the middle schoolers, or if it was vice versa. Who got that started? Was it volunteer-led? Is that something that I can help with? I'm very an active volunteer. I'd be more than willing to get that program started if need be. But I think it's a really great program for girls. And like I said, all of you mentioned peer-to-peer mentoring and how big of a difference that makes for individual kids. It was great. My daughter was like, Mom, I'm not going to do that. That's ridiculous. I don't need mentoring, blah, blah, blah. Too bad you're going. Not a big deal. But she loves it now. These high school girls really know how to talk to them on a level that maybe I don't know how to, or that their teachers don't know how to, and they're friends now.
Well,
and
to
they
Scott's
feel
point,
that they can.
What did he say? That only
Absolutely.
2% of kids are going to their parents with an issue if they're identifying it at school.
Absolutely.
And so, Terry, I'm so glad you brought that up. That was a student, a high school teenage girl, actually came up with that program found a teacher to help support it and grow it. And I absolutely agree with you. We need an equivalent program for boys, and I will get to work on that right away. I can't say any better than what you said. The benefits of it are.
First and foremost, thank you guys for all that you do. I think this is a really good open forum, and I think that it's led to some great discussion. I've heard a lot of good ideas from you guys as far as resource officers, you know, good guys on the scene with a gun. Bullying, I think that's very imperative that we touch base on. The one thing I have not heard from you guys, at what point do we examine the curriculum that you're teaching our children? Is that something that you've considered? Listen, I'm a legal professional. I'm not involved in education. I have no insight into that, so please educate me on the matter. God has been removed from schools. And I think that this should be considered as an option given the objective proofs for God. You know, we teach our kids that they come from monkeys and then they kill each other based on theory. So at what point do we stand up and say maybe this is a viable option? Or incorporate more faith-based programs into our schools, more faith-based outreach to our schools, incorporate God a little bit back into our schools. That's it. I mean, go ahead and answer that.
Air Force ROTC, Sea Cadet Corps, a lot of military programs growing up. I was in the military program starting at 12 years of age, and as Scott knows, I retired from Genesee County Sheriff's Department. Is that something, those type of programs are, I mean, we've got the athletic programs and stuff in all the schools and stuff, but if you're a nerd, which I was, I fit in really good with the military programs. And it taught me an awful lot about, you know, your constitutional foundation and how to treat people, how to respect people, how to take orders, how to give orders. Have we ever considered checking with the military to see if there's any programs like that that might be available for here?
Well, I'll answer the gentleman's question in the back first. Tough question.
That's a tough question.
Yeah. No, tough question. I have said for years, as a faithful person myself, that public education or any public entity in that realm is a mere reflection of what our society is. And I think we could make the argument that, and this is more of a personal commentary than that of a superintendent or public official, is that, you know, we see the American family is in real crisis right now. And I think it's in large part due to some of what you were alluding to, and maybe we've lost our way a bit in that regard. And so, you know, until there is a personal level of accountability with each individual in our nation, and embracing some of the values that you speak to, and then imparting those values in their home, I think we're in big trouble. And I say that with full confidence that your question really speaks more to what is maybe as part of the formal curriculum inside of our educational system, and how we address that, and that issue has been settled as far as I can tell from a legal perspective, and predates any of our superintendencies, that the discussion of religion, the discussion of morality, is not dead in schools. That's not necessarily accurate. All that we seek to do, I mean, I taught like a religious studies based course when I was a teacher, and it was really a conversation socio-politically about how religion impacted a variety of things: culture, all the world wars, the shape of different societies, and all those things. We talked about the conflict between, you know, various religions and ethnic groups. All those things are still very much part of the conversation, because religion is intertwined in our social-political fabric of our world. So the endorsement of a particular religion, right, is where we run into real sticky ground with the separation of powers, and certainly advocating for a particular religion is not something that's in our realm or sphere of influence. I didn't hear you ask us to do that. However, I would go as far as to say that, and I mentioned it in my opening comments, that your local public school's primary function is to identify what the local values, mores, and ethics are of the community in an attempt to mirror that the best they can, and that it's really encapsulated in the phrase local control. It's why education looks different from state to state, community to community, and we choose a particular place to live because the morals and ethic fabric of that community reflect what we want to raise in our own homes. So to that end, you know, in my school district, for example, we still partner with local churches to pass out Bibles to elementary kids, right? That's not happening in several states in our union. It's not happening, right? But the capacity for that to happen in a place like Lapeer is tremendous, right? We still have prayer groups, and we have an entire team of prayer warriors that pray our buildings every day, pray the lockers, pray the bus garage, and that happens in every single one of the county schools. I meet with local prayer leaders on a weekly basis to talk about what the faith community can do to help support the school systems. So it's two separate issues. One is the curriculum side, which has really been settled, right? That's not for us to debate. But the other piece is, how do you invite the local faith community to be a legitimate partner, not just pay lip service to, oh yeah, we have the youth minister come in and he volunteers at lunch, but do you have actual programming that connects kids to faith leaders? Are they given access to your buildings to come in and help support you? And the answer to that question in this county is unequivocally yes. I've worked in Wayne County, I've worked in Oakland County, and the answer to that question in a setting like this would be much different. Right? So you are living in a community where our connection to the faith community, irrespective of denomination, is very strong.
I appreciate that. It's insightful, and I'm glad to hear that for Lapeer especially, because that's where my children go to Lapeer. And you say it's settled. At what point can we go back and dispute this and present, hey, why are we ignoring objective proofs as to God? Why are we moving the absolutes overseeing us that God gave us and replacing them with relative by man with no, you know, this tears down morality. And we have our kids, look at our society, right? So you guys as educators, I don't know your personal beliefs, and to be frank, I don't think you need to be a Christian or believe to have benefit from the absolutes given to us by God. Look at our country, look at our declaration, this country is founded upon this. So at what point do we go back and question the false curriculum that we're teaching our kids when there's no supportive evidence whatsoever for evolution? Listen, not trying to start a huge political debate here. I understand that there's a lot there to unpack. That's just my 2 cents. Go on.
Thank you. Those are good questions.
Great question.
Thank you. I think we'd all like to see more religion in schools. Jesus, yeah. All right. Anyhow, thank you all. Let's give them a hand for this. Nice job. Thank you very much, all of you. Thank you. Thank you. They were good questions. We're going to end up here with a couple quick things here. The next thing is our 50-50 drawing. So if you got your 50-50 raffle tickets out there, we'll